Hey everybody, so we've just learned all about the cell theory and all of our discoveries about cells. And we learned that we wouldn't have known anything about cells or how they even existed without the development of the microscope. Now, cells, we know, are the basic units of organisms, and they can only be observed underneath the microscope. They are too small to be seen with the naked eye. So there are three basic cell types. They include animal cells, plant cells, and bacterial cells, or what we call prokaryotic cells. Now, although all living things are made of cells, organisms might be considered unicellular, meaning that they are composed of only one cell, or, like the butterfly, multicellular, composed of many cells that may actually be organized into tissues, etc., and systems, kind of like we talked about in class. Now, cells vary in their cell size, and they range anywhere from 5 to 50 micrometers, okay? So you can see on this scale the range. All right, when you look at a frog egg is 1 millimeter in diameter. And when we look at normal plant and animal cells, they range anywhere in here. Okay, so most bacteria are down here, and then organelles are going to be from 1 micrometer and smaller. All right. So when we look at a basic cell is a tenth of a nanometer. So that's even smaller. All right. So which type of cell is actually larger? Well, plant cells are the biggest. They are larger than animal cells. And animal cells are larger than bacteria. So, oops. Didn't mean to shift that too far. Sorry, people. Mrs. Lauren's having issues. All right. So, how big is a micron? So, we know that when we look at a ruler, we know what a centimeter looks like. And we know that a centimeter has 10 millimeters. Well, each millimeter then is divided up into microns. And so, 1 centimeter is actually 10,000 microns. Okay? There is 1,000 microns in each of those millimeters. So in 1 inch, there's like 25,000 microns. That's a huge number. All right. Now, when we look at multicellular organisms, and we had talked about this in class as well, a little bit with our sewer lice introduction, but the cells that are in multicellular organisms tend to specialize. So they tend to take on different shapes and different functions. Now, if you think about the different cells that make up you, there's a wide variety and they perform many different functions. Okay, for example, a nerve cell is very distinct in shape, but that's because it transmits information. So it almost has like these long extensions or wires for communication. All right. So let's talk about cell specialization just a little bit. Cells in a multicellular organism become specialized once certain genes turn on or turn off during the development of that cell. And so the cell can go from being a basic stem cell to becoming a nerve cell, to becoming a white blood cell or a muscle cell. Okay, this process is known as differentiation. Originally, when the sperm fertilized the egg, your basic cell that then became an embryo and a fetus was one kind of cell, and as it divided, it remained the same kind of cell until this process of differentiation occurs. Now, there are different specialized cells in animals. So muscle cells are very, very distinct in their shape because of the performance that they do for us. Because they contract and they stretch, they have to be long. Now, red blood cells are the cells that people usually refer to as donut shaped. They have that little kind of indentation or cup, and that's where they actually hold the oxygen, and that's how they carry it. Now cheek cells are different because your cheek is basically a covering, okay? So the inside of that epithelium on the inside of your cheek there, when you chew it, you're actually chewing off some of these little dead skin cells. And so what we may do in class in our microscope lab is actually take some of those cheek cells and see if we can stain them this color and actually view them in the same way. Now, there are specialized cells that exist in plants as well. So there's guard cells that don't look like a typical plant cell. They're not that long rectangular brick shape. They're almost kidney bean shape. There are xylem cells, which are much larger than the other cells because they're designed to transport water for the plant. Then we've got pollen grains, and those cells are even more different. So when we look at the organization levels of life, we have to talk about from the difference from atoms in our biochemistry unit all the way up to organisms. So when we look at the different non-living levels, we start with an atom. Those atoms get put together, right? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, all get put together to make up those basic molecules of life, those organic compounds. So hopefully you're recognizing, here's a lipid, right? Here's a sugar, here's a complex sugar, here's a DNA molecule, okay? Here's a protein. All of those things then are combined in different ways and formats in order to produce organelles. So when we compare that to the living levels, if we kind of use that same analogy, what is the basic unit? Well, cells. And so living things actually start here. This is the smallest unit, remember, that we can consider living. Then there are tissues, and those tissues are similar cells working together. And then we've got organs, and then we've got the organ systems, and then finally the organism. All right. So now that we've looked at the different levels that make up an organism, we have to look at whether cells are considered simple or complex. And so we typically refer to this as cell type. Now, prokaryotes were the first cells on Earth, or so it's believed. They are cells that lack a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. They include bacteria, and they are considered the simplest type of cell. Now remember, from the size, from that scale, we learned that bacteria were actually smaller than plant and animal cells. Now they're small, but they also have some other differences on the inside. They have what's called a single circular chromosome. It's not like our chromosomes that we have. And the reason they have a single circular chromosome is because they actually lack a nucleus. Instead, they have what's called a nucleoid region. Okay, so in the center of that cell, you can see all that DNA, and it's one big circle, but it's almost balled up like yarn, so you can't really tell where the start is or where the end is. That's what they consider the nucleoid region, okay? It's surrounded by both a cell membrane and a cell wall, which contains a very special compound called peptidoglycan, and we only find that in bacteria, in these prokaryotic cells. They contain ribosomes, but there's no membrane around the ribosomes. Okay, so what we do know is that prokaryotic cells do not contain any membrane-bound organelles. So they have to have ribosomes. The ribosomes are where all the proteins are made. But other than that, they don't have anything else that's membrane-bound except for their cell membrane. Now, eukaryotic cells are the other cell type. So pretty much everything that we're going to look at for the rest of the year is going to be a eukaryote or a prokaryote. So the eukaryotes differ in that they have a nucleus. They have membrane-bound organelles. So you can see that in the diagram there is a larger variety of organelles. Eukaryotic cells include organisms like protists, fungus, plants, and animals, and they are definitely a more complex type of cell. So the eukaryotic cell contains three basic cell structures: the nucleus, the cell membrane, and then the cytoplasm, which holds all the rest of the organelles. Okay, so those are the three main regions or basic cell structures. So there's two different types of eukaryotic cells: the plant cell and the animal cell. Now, our goal is going to be to compare and contrast these two cells. What makes them the same? What makes them different? Okay? Now, here's what I want you to do. On your quiz for this section, at the end of this section, when you go to take the cell structure and function quiz, if you've listened to this entire video, I want you to remember that the magic word, your secret word, if you put this on your quiz, somewhere on your quiz, I'll give you extra credit. I want you to write down the secret word is samurai. Okay? Try and spell it right. Okay? But samurai is going to be the secret word. Now, don't tell anybody. This is supposed to be for you to earn credit because you just listened to that whole thing. Thanks a lot, guys.